And another thing that I noticed that was initiated into this war was religious ideology. Um, how did that shape the direction in which the war effort went? Because I really feel like that gave the Romans a bit of oomph that the
Yeah,
Persians weren't able to have because they were trying to be more ecumenical when it came to the religious differences.
you're absolutely right. The Persians simply couldn't respond, and it looks as if this was the chief Roman reaction to the loss of Jerusalem, and then to the rejection of the humiliating terms that they'd offered. Their chief response was to go over to propaganda, religious propaganda of as powerful as they could make it. And then later, when we come into the era of the fight back, was to start pouring such propaganda out onto the troops to give them the sense that they were going to fight a holy war against an evil empire.
And this is where you see martyrdom introduced into theological into the thinking of the Romans.
Yes.
Did martyrdom exist or did this concept of martyrdom on the battlefield exist in Christianity before this event, or did Heraclius introduce a new concept with martyrdom on the battlefield?
It was a new concept for Romans introduced by Heraclius, but it had existed before in Armenia at the time of the two 5th century Armenian rebellions, the rebellions of the Armenians in the Persian sector of Armenia against the Sasanian authorities. And then and it's basically articulated by the Armenian clergy, and they see the Armenian fighters, and they're enormously outnumbered, as they've got halos as they're going into battle. So it was current. I mean, the notion had surfaced before, but it's very, very odd that in the very year that the prophet, after the Battle of Badr, was in effect viewing those who died in a battle as martyrs. In that same year, Heraclius is announcing the same thing when he crosses into Persian territory.
Yeah, I remember I heard you mention that before, and I found that to be very interesting, like how you know, that wouldn't have been the only thing that happened concurrently between Heraclius and the Prophet Muhammad, but you know, was that just happenstance? Was it a coincidence, or were, as you mentioned, in Armenia, this concept had been brewing? Was there some type of connection to where in the Arabian Peninsula, via its Christian population, that this concept that Muhammad was able to grab hold of this concept or understand this concept and utilize it towards his own troops? Because you know this is kind of a hard thing to kind of make sense of, unless you know. Of course, our sources are silent about a lot of things concerning Muhammad. Could have had more information available to him than what has been recorded. But I just find what you mentioned to be very interesting, and I try to reconcile. I was trying to reconcile it the first time I heard it myself.
Well, I mean, that there were large Christian communities in Arabia, particularly in Najran, way to the south. There were some Christians in Mecca, and of course, there were ramified trade connections with the north. So it's not impossible that it came down. But then, the prophet is so extraordinary that I wouldn't rule anything out. So I remain neutral on this happenstance or connection. But basically, you've got a monotheist religion in the north and in terrible trouble, coming up with the idea, and we've got Muhammad in Medina, but as you know, a small minority of the Quraysh are the true believers and who've emigrated to Medina. So they are in a comparatively weak position. So it's, I mean, I think it's, so, the situations were comparable.
Yeah, you see similarities between the two situations.
So I don't see it as impossible that both that Heraclius, well, admittedly, Heraclius was crossing the boundary from Roman Armenian territory to Persian Armenian territory when he comes up with it, so that there's obviously a more direct possible connection. But whether the emperor really would have been aware of what Armenian clergy had said, 150, 200 years earlier, I don't know. I suspect similar situations, belief systems which are not that dissimilar and are thoroughly monotheist. I think it could have happened, or it's divine design.
Or as you mentioned in another podcast, dust in the sunlight that people were able to just grab hold of and make it their own. I actually have a lot more to say about that. There's another theory, I think it's called like the 100 monkey theory, where they did a test with monkeys and the monkey started doing something in one region of the earth, and then all of a sudden monkeys in a totally different region were doing the same thing. So
I don't think we should compare Heraclius and the prophet.
no, no, you're gonna get me in trouble.
I
Uh,
know. So um,
and
uh,
you answered my next question, which was, what impact did Heraclius' view on martyrdom have on the formation of Islamic identity? I think we're probably just gonna have to put that one on the shelf for a bit until more information is discovered.
I can tell you that the late Patricia Croner, who was the most extreme of all skeptics about Islamic origins, she was absolutely riveted when I came up with it. I suppose about 15 years ago at a seminar. And she then promptly went off to look through the Quran to see what evidence there is in the Quran for jihad, jihad leading to the rewards of paradise for those who died in battle. And so she came back with a great list for me. Um, so there's absolutely, it's not something that the seerah, that the biography of the prophet invented. It's something for which you've got plenty of justification in the holy book itself.